Now we go now to the third classification of mycosis, which is your subcutaneous mycosis. You have 5 examples or 5 species under it. You have your Sporotrix, Fonsacea, Fialophora, Pseudo-Aliceria, and the Exophiala genselmi. So we'll discuss them one by one. Your Sporotrix Schenke causes the disease sporotrichosis. It is characterized as a dimorphic fungi, meaning it both exhibits the mold phase and the yeast phase. In the tissue, kapag si Sporotrix Schenke nasa tissue, ang itsura niya would be asteroid body. Ito siya, para siyang star-like projection. And pag mold siya, it would look like a floweret conidia or daisy-like. Ito naman siya. Yung mga daisies kasi, yung flower itself, maliliit lang siya, tas cute sila. Ito, mukha siyang daisy. And the most common disease for this one is the rose gardener disease. Kasi it usually happens to gardeners, specifically yung mga rose farmers. Kasi kapag natutusok sila ng thorns ng rose, ayun, nagkakaroon sila ng Sporotrix Schenke. These are cord-like multiple subcutaneous nodules. Your chromoblastomycosis is a disease wherein kapag nasa infected tissue, ang itsura niya is like sclerotic bodies. Sclerotic bodies, para silang mga benchinko. They look like 25 cents na pinagsama-sama. They are also copper colored. So, para silang rust. And then, in the lesion, it's like a cauliflower-like lesion. So, yan, para silang mga flower. And then, in the agar, it would look like dark colonies with black rivers. Now, your chromoblastomycosis disease is caused by the 2 subcutaneous mycoses, your Fonsacea pedrusoi and your Fialophora verrucosa. Now, these two have a nice distinguishing characteristics because your Fonsacea pedrusoi is a very slow growing subcutaneous mycosis, while your Fialophora verrucosa is rapidly growing. So, yun yung difference nila, main difference nila. Aside from that, your Fonsacea pedrusoi grows in short chains, while your Fialophora verrucosa have a formation of a vase-like or flask-like sa conidia niya. Ayun o, para siyang vase. Tapos yan, mga flower. And then, yung itsura nila kapag nasa plate, si Fonsacea, yung colony niya is a gray-black, velvety to cottony texture, while your Fialophora verrucosa is olive gray or black, woolly to cottony texture. So, yung main difference lang talaga nila, or one way to distinguish the two of them is through the growth. Pag slow growing, Fonsacea agad. Pag rapidly growing, Fialophora verrucosa. So, example, in case studies, sinabi na the patient had chromoblastomycosis. So, you run down, so dalawa na lang na mycos yung ipipiliin nyo. So, it's either Fonsacea or Fialophora. Now, kapag sinabing very slow growing, Fonsacea yon. Pero kapag sinabing rapidly growing, 3 to 5 days to grow na sa infected tissue, Fialophora verrucosa agad yung sagot nyo. Okay? Next, you also have your mycetoma, or also known as your Madura foot. It has a triad of symptoms, yung 3S. Huwag niyong kakalimutan to. Your sulfur granules, your swelling, and the sinus tracts. So, there's a presence of sulfur granules on the infected part. There's also a swelling, and the sinus tracts of the person also swells. So, huwag kakalimutan to. The Madura foot or mycetoma is caused by either the Pseudo-Aliceria boydii or Exophiala genselmi. Now, your Madura foot, aside from it may be caused by a mycosis, it can also be caused by bacteria. So, it's either caused by eumycotic mycetoma or actinomycotic mycetoma. Pag sinabing eumycotic mycetoma, these are the groups of yeast or molds. So, dito yung mycosis part. So, si Pseudo-Alicearia, Aspergillus, Exophiala, Curvularia, and Madorella, all of them are mycoses that causes mycetoma. While kapag actinomycotic mycetoma, these are caused by bacteria. And these are Actinomadure, Streptomyces, and your Actinomyces. So, pag sinabing patient had Madura foot, okay. Next, it was caused by a yeast. Therefore, ito na lang yung pagpipilian nyo. Pseudo, Aspergillus, kulang na letter S, guys. Exophiala, Curvularia, or Madurella. Pag sinabi naman niya it's caused by bacteria, it's either Actinomadure, Streptomyces, or Actinomyces. Next, you have your systemic mycoses. So, itong apat na to, saan natin sila nabanggit kanina? These four are dimorphic fungi. So, meaning they both exhibit the mold phase and the yeast phase. For the first one, you have your Coccidioides immitis. Take note of the disease that it causes, the San Joaquin Valley fever, the SIRT fever, and it's the major biohazard in the laboratory. Okay? The major biohazard systemic mycosis that you get in the laboratory is Coccidioides immitis. And the mold form, it looks like a barrel shape. Ito siya. With arthoconidia. Again, arthoconidia, meron siyang fragmented conidia. Kapag naman tissue form, it looks like a spirule with endospores. So, para siyang bilog around the tissue. And a cobweb colony. Cobweb colony, ito din siya. Next systemic mycose, you have your Histoplasma capsulatum. Take note again of the disease it causes. You have your fungus flu, your Darling's disease, and your Spelunker's cave disease. It is so called as Darling's disease kasi yung nakadiscover sa fungi na to is, ang apelido niya is Darling. Okay? And then, it's a cave disease because its mode of transmission is through the inhalation of the spore from bird and bat droppings. And usually, yung mga bats nakatira sa cave. In its mold form, it looks like a tuberculate macroconidia. Malaki siya. And then, in tissue form, it's formation of yeast cells and intracellular in macrophages. Yung yeast cells, nasa loob sila ng macrophages nyo. Third one, you have your Blastomyces dermatitis. Again, take note of the disease it caused. You have your North American blastomycosis, Chicago disease, and your Gilchrist disease. In its mold form, it looks like a lollipop. Okay? And then in tissue form, it's a single budding yeast with broad base. Ito yung broad base na sinasabi niya. Pero iisang budding yeast lang siya. Ito. Yan. Para siyang snowman, no? Next, you have your Coccidioides brasiliensis. It causes South American blastomycosis and Lutz splendor Almeida disease. In its mold form, same as the Blastomyces dermatitis, it has a lollipop appearance. In tissue form naman, anong difference ni Blastomyces dermatitis kay Coccidioides? In tissue form, it has a multiple budding yeast. So, what you call your mariner's wheel or navigator's wheel. Kung kanina, sa Blastomyces, it's only a formation of a single budding yeast. Kay Coccidioides, multiple yeast. So, meaning, ito lang, aside from this one, meron pa siya dito. So, madami. And then, notice that it's called mariner's wheel because yung, alam niyo yung ginagamit ng mga seaman na pang drive. Ayan, mukha siya nung manibela. Ayan. And lastly, for the classification of mycoses, you have your opportunistic mycoses. So we'll discuss them one by one. First one, your Candida albicans. Your Candida albicans is the only yeast that produces a germ tube. Anong itsura ng germ tube? Yung germ tube para siyang spoon na maliit. Tapos meron siyang bilog dito. And then aside from that, it has a star-like or feet-like projection on blood agar plate or in the BAP. Ang itsura niya ito. So, di ba ang yeast, remember, mukha siyang bacterial colony. So, ito, creamy yung texture niya. And then, star-like feet na kumakalat. Ayun. And then, take note that it produces the following. You have your blastoconidia, your pseudohyphae, and your chlamydoconidia. So, ano yung mga yon? Si blastoconidia again, yung formation ng body yeast. So, your pseudohyphae, meron siyang part na, meron siyang septate hyphae, meron naman siyang part na choanocytic hyphae. And then your chlamydoconidia, ito yung rounding up sa ends ng conidia nyo. And then, in the serology part, it produces the virulence factors, aspartyl protease, hydrophobicity, and phospholipase. Tatandaan to, mga ito. Now, you have your biochemical test for Candida albicans. First one is the germ tube test. Your germ tube test is the screening test for Candida albicans, wherein your reagent is placed on a serum at room temperature. Kasi remember that your yeast grows well at 37 degrees Celsius. Ito nga ulit yung itsura ng germ tube under the microscope. And then, your confirmatory test for Candida albicans is your corneal agar with twin 80. The positive test that you're looking for in the corneal agar is the presence of the chlamydiospore or the rounding up on the ends of your fungi. Ayun, ito siya. Next, opportunistic mycosis. You have your Cryptococcus neoformans. This is the number one cause of fungal meningitis. Okay? Again, your Cryptococcus neoformans is the number one cause of fungal meningitis. It is present in pigeon, bats, and bird droppings, and also in soil. Its mode of transmission is through airborne, and it resembles as lymphocytes under the microscope. Ito, para siyang mga lymphocytes. Pero, in reality, Cryptococcus neoformans yung mga yan. Or yeast yung mga yan. Now, aside from that, para siyang merong white part, di ba? Bago yung dot mismo sa gitna, meron siyang white part. That is because of the capsule present in it. That is the encapsulated yeast. Makikita nyo lang yon through the stain of India ink. Ganito yung itsura niya kapag nilagyan ng India ink. And then, aside from that, it's also positive when placed in a bird seed or nigger seed. Anong spelling, guys? Nigger seed agar, wherein ang color niya is black colonies. And the colonies are black due to the presence of or the formation of phenol oxidase. So, aside from that, pwede din siyang i-culture sa Saborods dextrose agar without cycloheximide. Next, your third opportunistic is your Aspergillus. Your Aspergillus is the most common fungal contaminant. Now, under your Aspergillus, you have the following species. Your Aspergillus fumigatus, Aspergillus flavus, and Aspergillus niger. For fumigatus, ang tatandaan nyo dito, these are commonly known as your bread mold. Ito yung nakikita natin sa tinapay, kaya siya bread mold. Di ba anong napapansin nyo, anong kulay ng mold kapag expired na yung bread? Kulay green. Kasi si fumigatus, from the name itself, its color green. Okay? So, pag kumain kayo ng tinapay niyan, makikita, sasabihin niya, Aspergillus fumigatus. Char. Corny ako. Next. Aspergillus flavus, from the name itself, its color yellow. It is used for commercial food poisoning. And lastly, your Aspergillus niger is a brown to black spore. So, from the name itself, ang color ng colony niya is black. Last opportunistic mycosis, you have your Pneumocystis girovechi. Natandaan nyo, ang previous name niya is Pneumocystis carinii. Nung time namin, which is 3 years ago, bagong name lang si girovechi. Ang mas common si carinii. Pero sa inyo, mas common ang ginagamit si girovechi. It's a yeast-like fungal infection and it's the #1 cause of pneumonia and opportunistic infection in the disease of AIDS. And the best species to diagnose Pneumocystis girovechi is the BAL or the bronchoalveolar lavage. So we'll go now to the third part of your mycology, which are the laboratory diagnosis in mycology. So I'll only go a rundown on this one kasi na-discuss thoroughly naman siya nung lower years nyo. So your Saborod dextrose agar SDA is a general isolation medium containing peptone and glucose as the nutrients. And then again, SDA with olive oil is for the Malassezia furfur. Next, you also have your DTM or your dermatophyte test medium. This is used for the isolation of dermatophytes from hair, skin, and nails. So, ang indicator na ginagamit niya is phenol red, wherein yung negative niya is yellow, and then kapag positive na siya, it becomes color red. Next, you have your mycocell or mycobiotic agar. This is also used for the isolation of dermatophytes, but in plate form. And then aside from that, it contains inhibitory agents, which is your C and C, which is chloramphenicol and cycloheximide. Next, your corneal agar with Twin 80, as I've mentioned a while ago, this is used for the identification of Candida albicans by the presence of chlamydia spore. And again, it's the confirmatory test for Candida albicans. Next, you have your nigger seed or bird seed agar. This is used for the isolation of your Cryptococcus neoformans. The production of phenol oxidase breaks the medium, forming your melanin or black colonies. Your urea agar. Again, your urea agar is also used for the isolation of Cryptococcus neoformans. And aside from that, it is used for the differentiation of Trichophyton mentagrophytes and Trichophyton rubrum. Take note, Trichophyton mentagrophytes, positive siya sa urea. Again, positive siya ng hair bathing test, tapos positive din siya ng urease. And then rubrum, negative. Next, potato dextrose agar or PDA is used for the demonstration of the pigment production of the Trichophyton rubrum. Again, color red. Ito siya. Next, your rice medium is used for the identification of Microsporum odoini. Your Microsporum odoini grows well in the rice grains. Ayan. Next, you have your Japex agar. Your Japex agar is used in the differential identification of several Aspergillus species. So, kapag nag-form siya ng black, it's your Aspergillus niger. Kapag green, Aspergillus either parasiticus, which is hindi naman clinically diagnosed. You have your Aspergillus flavus pag green. And then, you have also other species present, pero hindi na natin sila minention. And aside from that, it is also used for the identification of Nocardia species. Next, you have your KOH mount or potassium hydroxide mount. This is used as a screening test in the keratinized tissue suspected for any fungal infections. This test is the most commonly fungi test used in the laboratory. When I was working in the hospital, ginagamit namin to for fungal infections. So, ang ginagawa namin dito is, kukuha ng blade. Maliit lang na blade. Tapos, example, yung patient, meron siyang papatest na fungal infection sa bandang finger niya. So, for example, nandito, ito yung finger niya. Tapos, ito yung parang gusto niyang ipatest. So, gagawin, i-blade to, isi-scrape namin to. Okay? So, magkakaroon ng mga, yung scrapings, ilalagay sa slide. And then, after that one, pagkukumpulin sila, and then magdodrop kayo ng potassium hydroxide dun sa mga scrapings nyo. And then, cover it with cover slip, and then, heat gently para mag-squeeze yung cover slip tsaka yung sa glass slide para hindi lumabas yung specimen nyo. And then, after that, i-check siya under the microscope for the presence of yeast. Eto sila. Para lang silang bubbles sa microscope. Pero, in reality, these are already yeast cells. Ayun. Next, you have your slide culture. Your slide culture, this is the most accurate method to preserve and observe fungal species. But, this is not commonly used in the laboratory kasi, one, this is dangerous. Kasi, once you grow a fungal species, hindi na magsa-stop yung growth niya unless you have proper disposal of it. So, yung itsura niya would be, ito yung plate niyo, lalagyan nyo ng tubig. Tapos, magpapatong kayo ng parang stick, parang lulutang si nutrient agar between two glass slides or cover slips, and then ko-cover nyo, tapos lalagay nyo ulit yung nutrient agar. Para parang, tas yung mold, magsa-start siya dito, and then hanggang sa mag-grow siya. Ganito na yung magiging itsura niya. But take note, this test is not for the following: your coccidioides, histoplasma, and blastomyces. Why? Because these three species demonstrates a dimorphic fungi. So, ang makikita nyo lang, ang madademonstrate nyo lang dito is yung mold phase, hindi yung yeast phase. Next, we also use your India ink or nigrosin stain for the identification of the capsule in Cryptococcus neoformans. And it's also used when your specimen is CSF or cerebrospinal fluid. You also have your LCTB or your lactophenol cotton blue stain. This visualizes a blue color to the cell walls and usually used for Candida albicans. You also have your calcofluor white. This is used as a brightening agent that binds the chitin in the fungal cell wall. Kaya siya para siyang kumikinang under the microscope. This is used for the detection of several fungi species. Aside from the histopath, ginagamit din natin yung iba't ibang stains for the detection of mycoses. You have your Giemsa or right stain for Histoplasma capsulatum and Cryptococcus neoformans. You also use your methanamine silver nitrate for fungi species when it's in histological specimen rather. Usually kapag yung specimen nyo tissue, ginagamit is silver nitrate. And then you also use your PAS or your periodic acid shift. It stains the hyphae of molds and some yeast, and color ng stain is pink to purple stain. So that ends the part 1 for the mycology and virology.